The following program contains scenes of violence. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the RWT Podcast. Good morning, RWT wrestling fans. I'm Emir Bian Costello. And here we are for yet another episode of the Raw Wrestling Talk Podcast. Definitely want to thank you guys for hanging in there with me. You know, truth is, I don't even know if you guys find this show interesting. I just keep doing it. I just keep waking up every morning and doing the show. Because I think it's fun. And every time I ask somebody to be a guest on the show, they're like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do your podcast that 11 people listen to. But hey, man, that's what happens with greatness, you know? You gotta start somewhere, right? I mean, let's be honest, anybody who's ever had a successful podcast wasn't like there was a million people that listened the first time out. Unless they were already a celebrity like Chris Jericho or Stone Cold, those guys, of course. People couldn't wait to hear their podcast, but let's say like Adam Carolla, you know? He's been in radio for years, but the first radio show he ever did, back when nobody knew who he was, huh? I mean, people, you think we're lining up to listen to that thing, huh? I don't know. 5, 6, maybe? Point is that, now, probably hundreds of thousands of people listen to Adam Carolla every day on his podcast, so perhaps I will be the next Adam Carolla. So it's summertime on this beautiful Sunday morning, and I am still dealing with the animal kingdom in my house. Last week I interviewed the heel of the page, Teddy P. Gennaro, and I had a water bug chasing me the entire interview, which I promptly killed directly after the interview. Rest in peace, water bug. And today I wake up and, I realized something about my neighborhood. You know, I think there's just a few feet outside my door, underneath the grass, there's the headquarters for the ants, you know? And the queen ant, she's sitting inside of her war room with all her best generals. And it got a blueprint of my house. And her only game plan is to send every single soldier that she's got into my house. And there really is no plan after that, you know? Let's just have all the ants go in. We're going to have them come in through the front door. We're going to have them come in through the back door. We're going to have them come in through the bathroom. We're going to have them come in through the electrical sockets in the wall. And then, once they get there, they can just kind of hang out, because that's as much planning as she could possibly do. Get into the house, and then after that, I don't know. You figure it out. Except for what they didn't count on is that I'm an early riser, baby. And I couldn't wait to get up this morning to record another episode of the RWT Podcast. And when I walked out and saw every ant ever made in the history of human civilization in my living room, I said, you know what? I'm a badass motherfucker. And I'm not going to let this stand. I will not let these bugs take over my house. I got to put my foot down. But not in the ants, though, because they would crawl over it. And I got to stand up for my family. All right? It can't go down like this. So being the super dad that I am, I grabbed the only weapon that I had at my disposal, which was the Swiffer jet. I was going to say, I grabbed my Swiffer jet. And, man, I started spraying whatever chemicals are in that thing. You just push the button and everything sprays out. And, all of a sudden, those ants that were just moving, they just froze. I don't know if it burned them up or what. In fact, if I had known the Swiffer jet was all I needed in the first place to combat these ants, I would just be buying bottles of this solution and dumping it on the grass outside. Hopefully that won't result in the gas going up in an instantaneous fire when it gets too hot later on today. But to be honest, I really don't give a fuck. I'm kind of tired of dealing with ants. I can't wait to get to the winter months. And I don't even know what bugs come in the winter months, but I just know the summertime brings flies and it brings ants, and I am tired of fighting Mother Nature. For once, I just want to sit in my house and not feel like I'm in the fucking Jungle Book. Can you relate? Anywho, we got a good show planned today. I'm going to have a guest on coming up whose name is Bian Green. And Bian Green is kind enough that on the page he writes a review every week for the Cruiserweight Classic that's happening, and for NXT after every show. Now, I've never had the pleasure of meeting Bian Green in person yet. I know him because he's a friend of a friend, and now he's becoming my friend because he's a big wrestling fan like me. So I'm going to talk to this guy for as long as he wants to talk and just kind of find out, what made you a wrestling fan in the first place? Because, this guy is like a super wrestling fan. If you look at his Facebook profile, every picture is wrestling. He's got the championship belts, and, he just seems to be full on into it, which is super cool, because that's the way I'm into wrestling. If you're going to go, you got to go all the way in, baby. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to figure out what makes this guy tick. What was it about wrestling that caught his eye? And also, we're going to be discussing heavily the Cruiserweight division, the Cruiserweight Classic, all things Cruiserweights. And, since he writes that review on the page for us, I figure he's a resident expert when it comes to the Cruiserweights there. So, who knows? If you're listening close, you might learn something that you didn't know. So anyways, we got him coming up after the break. I'm thinking that's going to be a great conversation. Maybe a two-parter, I don't know. Depends on how long it goes. But I am going to take a break real quick. Probably get a glass of water. My throat feels parched. Is that the right word? I don't know. Look it up. And coming up on the other side of the break, I will have Bian Green for you guys. Hang in there. This August, WWE turns up the heat on New York City with summer's hottest event, 8/21/16, Brooklyn. WWE SummerSlam, live Sunday, August 21st, only on the WWE Network. Welcome back to the RWT Podcast. Don't you just love this song? Doesn't everybody just love Seth Rollins? Yeah. Must be nice to be the man, right? I think Seth Rollins is pretty cool. I don't know. And I think at SummerSlam he's gonna be the first Universal Champion, because what sense does it make to give it to Finn Balor? But that's just me. But anywho, as promised, it is time for the man, the myth, the legend, Bian Green. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much. I'm doing great this morning. This is my very first ever podcast sort of appearance. So, hey, thanks for the opportunity, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I've been up fighting an army of ants, and so that's always fun. I would like to think that I'm winning the battle, but I wiped out the first and second and third and fourth lines of their infantry, and I can already see a new pile forming. But that's going to have to wait. Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah, that's
every summer.
Every summer, man. That's what I don't get. Like, what are they looking for?
They're looking for their SummerSlam main event,
Yeah, they're going to get themselves SummerSlammed messing with me.
All right. Well, good luck with that, sir.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to let them kind of keep piling up until after we're done recording this episode, and then I'll go back and set flames to them without, burning down the house, hopefully. We'll see.
that's never fun. Good luck. Yeah, every summer, I would have an issue like that. But hey, I don't know what they're looking for. Maybe you got some nice food out. Maybe you can, I don't know, lay a trail of cigarettes to your neighbor's house you don't like so much and give them a hard time. But
yeah, that's funny. And you know what the thing is? Probably unless you live in a house, and maybe even if you do live in a house, everybody's got at least a few neighbors that they don't like. I would love for the ants to be ruining their morning, but instead they're here with me. I guess I'm the guy who gets it today.
Oh, okay.
So,
right on.
Tell me, man. I've been looking at your Facebook page and trying to learn a little bit about you, and you seem to be like a wrestling super fan, man. What's up with that?
Somewhat. I guess you could say that. Just about every day I do something that involves something to do with wrestling. I have the network, and what I've been doing since I got it, I started watching wrestling around WrestleMania 19. I don't know what year that was, maybe around 2002 or so. So I never really get a chance to go back and watch everything from the Attitude Era. Everyone would always talk about, the Attitude Era, and Stone Cold, and The Rock, and, I jumped right in at WrestleMania 19, where it was, what was it? We had Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho. We had Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar. I think Chris Benoit was putting on some great matches back then. It was that Ruthless Aggression era. But I never really get to see where some of these veterans that are around nowadays came from. And every day or so I'll watch, something from 1998 working towards 1999. It's taken me a couple months. I'm barely about to get into the year 2000. I've been going weekly. So I guess you could say, I am a super fan. I've been to a lot, I don't want to say a lot, a few independent shows. Actually going to one next week. Been to a couple of Raw. Been to a pay-per-view. I consider yourself a super fan when you spend a lot of money on it. I don't think I spent too much money. I've kind of been reasonable, but very long-winded answer. Yes, I guess you could say I am a super fan. Love to talk
great.
Wrestling all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so you're saying, so personally for me, I've been watching wrestling since 1990. I want to say I was probably about 4 years old when I started watching the pay-per-views, and so I grew up watching, Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. I mean, I was what you're trying to go back and relive, and frankly, you didn't even go back as far as this stuff that I'm mentioning. But I lived all this stuff, and so the first question that pops in my mind is WrestleMania 19. That's when you kind of got tuned in. How old were you at the time?
Oh, dude, I'm gonna sound like a baby. I was in the 6th grade, so I think I was about 11 years old or so.
Wow.
Yeah,
you do. Yeah, that's pretty young. Because I was thinking to myself, I was thinking, did this guy wait till he was like in his late teens or something to start watching wrestling? Who does that? Because usually,
it's a little weird.
I mean, yeah, some people, it's rare. Like, so for instance, my wife watches wrestling with me now, but it's because it's me. It's not like she would have ever discovered it on her own or cared about it, but because she, that's how marriage goes, man. You watch a bunch of bullshit that you don't really want to be watching, and somewhere in all the bullshit, you find something that you go, this is actually kind of cool after all.
This is nice, yeah.
But the typical wrestling fan, usually it's like they start out when they're a kid and stuff like that. So, man, you were in the 6th grade when Jericho versus Michaels happened? That's crazy.
Yeah, I actually didn't really discover it on my own. I really didn't ever like wrestling. Through elementary school, I'd hear people talk about it, and I'd be like, "Oh, what garbage," why don't you watch some real TV, like some Power Rangers or something, you know? But, no, one of my family friends, you know, put on, WrestleMania 19 for me, and I don't know, there was just something about the grandeur of it all, you know, not just like the in-ring action, but just like the entrances and like the fireworks and like the production element of it. I was just like, wow, what is this? And then without knowing the storylines, you know, there were some really great matches that year that told great stories in and of themselves, just like Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho, which is my favorite match of all time, just based off of that story that they told. You know, at the end of the match, you know, Jericho loses and he's all upset, and you know, Shawn Michaels hugs him, and then, you know, after they break away, Chris Jericho, you know, kicks him in the nads and then pushes him down. You know, it's like one of the greatest things to me.
The way Shawn Michaels kind of like he slides down Chris Jericho's chest in slow motion.
Yeah,
he's got that look on his face. It's
so,
like, why?
yeah.
How could you do this to me? And Jericho just shoves him away.
It's great. It's great, and I think that's why I'm more of a guy who's into the matches that can stand independently on their own and tell a good story, rather than depending on a great story to build up to a match. And I'm seeing a lot of that within the Cruiserweight Classic these days, which is great. I think things like that can really bring a lot of new fans into watching wrestling, because we've lost a lot of our base fans over the years, and we need to bring some new people back. And there are some new things that they are trying to reel people in, and you know, that's how, you know, me being a casual fan, just walking into a room watching it, that's how I was hooked. So maybe that's something they can try to work towards again.
Right. So you mentioned before that the ruthless aggression, and you mentioned Chris Benoit, and you know, so I don't know if you know the backstory with, you know, at the time, this is before WWE had officially purchased WCW, and people were starting to realize that WCW was complete bullshit, because there was like 8 different versions of the NWO, and there was only like two WCW wrestlers left, and it was, I don't know, it just got weird. But so people slowly started to come over, you know, to WWE, and like one of the first like groups of people who came over were Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Benoit, you know, guys like that, Mysterio and Jericho. And so that was kind of like the beginning of WWE's cruiserweight division. Did you happen to see when any of those guys were jumping over?
Yeah, you know, I know a little bit of the history, you know, when the Radicals came over, and I never really, it's one of the things I want to do next is to actually get through some of the WCW episodes and to check out their cruiserweight division, because I know they had a lot of good names there. Juventud Guerrera, you know, Dean Malenko, I've seen some of his matches in WWE. You know, I'm very technically sound and a small guy. You know, not all cruiserweights are flashy, all over the place type of people. And, you know, yeah, I have seen some of Jericho's earlier matches. And I don't know if you've seen this match. Maybe you have. I'm sure you have. I believe it was Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero. It was a Halloween Havoc.
Halloween Havoc, I have seen it.
Yeah, they had one of like the most critically acclaimed matches ever. You know, they were definitely both cruiserweights back then. You know, they had that whole luchador style, and it seems to me like WCW didn't really capitalize on having these guys around. Like, they were just sort of, you know, filler at the beginning of the show. From what I've heard, you know, they didn't really elevate their cruiserweights to a level of success that, you know, they could have earned based off how talented they were. You know, to me, it sounds like they didn't really do too well with cruiserweights in the past.
Well, I think what it was is that, okay, so the wrestling business, So the era I grew up watching, if you just think about some of the guys I grew up watching, the British Bulldog, that's Davey Boy Smith, the Hulk Hogan, these guys, Sid Vicious, they all have one thing in common. These, the Ultimate Warrior, these guys they're jacked. They're
yoked up.
Yeah, they're 6 foot, something, in the upper, look, the Undertaker and Kane, these guys are built 7 feet tall. They got huge muscles. And so like the mentality in wrestling has always been that, like, if Vince McMahon he wouldn't have not ever have allowed a cruiserweight division if not for being able to look at his competition and see how entertaining it was to the crowd. Because for him, if you weren't a gym rat and 6 foot tall, then you're never going to get the title. None of that crap was going to happen. Like, it was
Right.
nothing short of a miracle when, like, Rey Mysterio, wins the world title. But like, they always say, like, he's like this genius and he's innovative, and he is, don't get me wrong, but also some of his best ideas was looking at the competition and recognizing that they had a better idea and then implementing that into the WWE. So thank God for WCW that brought the cruiserweights to light. You know what I mean? Because if not, there would have never been a cruiserweight division in the WWE. When those guys came over, man, they were high flying. Did you have like a favorite cruiserweight when you were first starting to watch wrestling?
You mentioned Rey Mysterio. He was on that WrestleMania 19 card, and I'll always fall back to that because that was like the first full card I remember. He had a Cruiserweight Championship match with Matt Hardy, and I think Rey Mysterio was the first guy I was like, wow, this guy's doing some crazy stuff I didn't know people could do. And so I've always had, a little bit of favoritism towards him. But, to Vince's credit, giving him, the World Championship, they didn't call it the World Heavyweight Championship when Rey Mysterio won it. Whenever it was referred to him being the champion on TV, it was always, it's the World Champion Rey Mysterio. So I did feel like Vince, or whatever circumstances were in order at that time, we're like, this is still a small guy. Even though he's holding the World Heavyweight Championship, he's not a heavyweight, so let's call it the World Champion. I don't know, I just felt like there was still a little bit of, some discomfort with him winning that world title. But, him, I would say, I remember the first time I saw Billy Kidman bust out a shooting star. They didn't really give him a lot of TV time. Back when they had the Velocity and Sunday Night Heat shows, he wrestled a lot there. Billy Kidman was always great. Jamie Noble, like I mentioned, not all cruiserweights being high flying and all over the place. He was more technical and ground and pound, and he had that whole redneck gimmick. He was an interesting character.
Right.
I remember Tajiri, of course, and but I think Rey Mysterio would stick out as being the top guy.
Yeah, and so the thing about it too, it's the belt system, right? It's not like boxing or UFC where there's like, not every belt is created equal in the WWE. So, for instance, where you could be the light heavyweight champion in UFC, and that's still considered a prestigious belt. That's like the belt of the lightweight division. But, in WWE, you win the cruiserweight title. That's just the cruiserweight title. That's not like being the WWE champion. And the thing about it is these guys, they have dreams too. It's, they're 5'6" and, 5 foot whatever. But they got into this business. They worked their ass off with the hopes of someday being WWE champion, not so they could be told you're going to work your entire career and never get to hold the strap just because you're genetically different than Big Daddy Cole Diesel or Kane and the Big Show,
Yeah, that's a little unfair. I, sometimes think like, if I had an extra couple grand on the side, I'd go to wrestling school. I have a friend, his name is Makoto, and he trains at the Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy. and this guy is like 160 pounds. Some of these dudes in this tournament are like 150 pounds. I think the smallest guy is like 143. And these guys are in the Cruiserweight Classic on TV in front of some of the biggest audiences that they're probably ever going to be in front of, just living their dream. And maybe this is like the only shot they have. Who knows how long they've worked, towards this. Someone like me, it's very hard for me to even put on weight if I wanted to. So to have someone say, hey, you're not big enough, or, you're not the body type we're looking for, be told that your entire career, as a professional as they are, it must be terrible to just have opportunity after opportunity just taken away from you because you're a small guy. I mean, look at probably the most famous story of it all, Daniel Bryan just being a small guy, and I'm glad that story got to play out, the way it did to WrestleMania 30. I feel like it's something a lot of people can relate to, and I feel like there's a lot of truth behind it when it comes to what we're talking about now.
Yeah, the Yes movement was something amazing to see, the Occupy Raw, all that stuff. I thought to myself, one of the things I liked about that storyline is that they were so truthful. People always say, people like who don't watch wrestling are like, oh, wrestling's fake. And then they just let the fact that the show has predetermined outcomes take away from the fact that the whole thing could overall be entertaining, as if they don't sit down and watch Seinfeld and Friends and all these scripted shows. I mean, let's just get over that bullshit. But when you look at like the Daniel Bryan story, they were very real. Like Triple H always saying, we just look at you as a B+ player. That wasn't just like a line from a script. He was like out there, that's a shoot. He's being truthful. He's like, yeah, to us, you're not that big, and you're not like a Batista, you're not like myself, Triple H, you're not like heavyweight champion material. Well, when you look at these guys, the Daniel Bryans, Rey Mysterios, they are working way harder than a heavyweight ever has to. And the funny thing about it is, prepare to have your mind blown. I'm sure this is something that but just to show you how bad the stigma is and the low level of talent that you have to have. There was a time where the great Khali was heavyweight champion.
I remember.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Like I remember him winning, and he held the belt upside down. He held it up and he held it upside down. It was the funniest thing.
Right. This guy has no access of movement. Like there's no, shucky ducky with the greatest of ease with this guy. I mean, he can barely lift his leg. I mean, there's nothing, he has no move set, I don't understand, but because he was tall and big, he got to be champion. Meanwhile, you got these cruiserweights who are diving off this and flipping off that and constantly putting their bodies on the line, and they're being told, you're not good enough to hold the belt. Oh, but we'll give it to the great Khali.
Oh, that's such an insult. His finish was a brain chop. It was so bad. Oh, those were some bad times. I think they gave that guy victories over, The Undertaker, guys like Mark Henry, but meanwhile, you have guys like Jeff Hardy who will put on legendary matches with The Undertaker. They had a ladder match back on Raw, I think it was back in 2003.
Yeah.
That people still go back and watch. And, he couldn't win that. But Great Khali does. I do see, the discrepancy, and that's annoying.
Yeah, and let's get it straight
here. Definitely a bad business decision.
Okay. The Undertaker is easily the most respected wrestler in the history of the business. And when the great Khali beat him, oh no, he was so lazy, he couldn't even be bothered to get down and cover him. He just put a foot on his chest. On the how disrespectful is that? But that's...
I hope that was at least, prompt prompted for him to do. I'm not.
Yeah, let's get this guy some
getting
hill
my big
heat.
ass down there.
It's like,
I
there's
hope
no
they told
way.
him to do that.
Yeah, it was weird, man. I just don't, I don't agree with it. Like, to me, if you're really about making people's dreams come true, you know, let's just be reasonable here. Let's just get over it. Because, okay, look at the Ultimate Warrior and compare him to anybody on the roster today. There's not one guy that looks like the Ultimate Warrior, okay? Big guys with giant muscles. You had your time. You had your run. That's cool. But you know what?
Yeah.
Nowadays, there's not people that are doing that, you know, to their bodies. And if they are, they just stay in the strongman competitions and the muscle and fitness, you know, type of like, you know, they're bodybuilding and lifting and competing over there, but they're not coming to be wrestlers anymore. If you look at the roster, almost everybody looks like Daniel Bryan today. So we have to redefine now what's a heavyweight. We can't keep going, you know, hoping that Batista's going to come back in between Guardian of the Galaxy movies to save us or something. You know what I mean?
I agree. Definitely.
So let's talk about the Cruiserweight Classic, man. Round 1. What'd you think of it?
Oh, round 1 was great. You know, we got to see a lot of faces that, you know, I've never heard of before. There were some familiar names that a lot of people were excited to see. First round ended with one of the best matches I've seen this year. If people are not watching this thing and consider themselves fans of wrestling, you're crazy. I have no idea why you're not watching this. As I said earlier, a lot of great storytelling in these matches without, you know, any fluffed up storylines necessarily lead you there. First round ended with Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. They are actually a tag team in NXT. They're number 1 contenders for the tag titles. They're getting their title shot next week in Brooklyn. These two tore the house down. I mean, I think Gargano is the best man to Ciampa at his wedding or something like that. So these dudes know each other, like, legitimately. And they took advantage of that and slapped each other so hard and knees flying all over the place. But besides their match, there's a lot of great matches in this tournament that came up. Names like Zack Sabre Jr., you know, arrived, and I feel like the crowd got hyped because they heard this name, but when they saw his style in the ring, they were just like, oh, we weren't really, you know, expecting this. Zack Sabre Jr., his style is, I think it's considered escapeology.
Right.
He likes to focus more on, you know, maneuvering out of submission holds and working a more slow-paced technical style. And I feel like that was something the crowd kind of really couldn't get too much energy behind, but they didn't know the name, so in the beginning they were excited. And, you know, they did give him his props and his match, and, you know, a lot of the matches garnered a respectful reaction from the crowd. Like, if you watch any matches from New Japan, the crowd is a lot more mellow and calm, and after they see a great sequence, they'll, you know, applaud for a brief moment, and then they'll go back to being silent, and they'll continue to watch the competition. You'll see some stuff like that within this tournament because some of the action is so great. Give me a second. I just wanted to look at, you know, some of these names here. I did see, I don't know if you've heard of TJ Perkins, but he's actually from the Los Angeles area, Filipino gentleman. I first saw him at a local wrestling show back in January in Torrance. There's a promotion called Pacific Coast Wrestling. They run every couple weeks in Torrance. He had an amazing match with a competitor named Scorpio Sky. You know, all the stuff he saw in the Cruiserweight Classic, you know, he did live in person, all the dabbing and the dancing and, you know, being all flashy and stuff like that.
Right.
But, besides that, you know, he had all the technical submissions and just amazing high flying maneuvers. I don't get how these guys walk these ropes, how they springboard off these ropes and do all sorts of corkscrews, and
they got to learn their craft.
It's just so ridiculous.
They take the time to learn their craft, which is really good, because these are guys that spend so much time in the independents, and they took wrestling school seriously, and they don't have the pressure of, like, you know, coming in to, let's say, NXT, and you're trying to hurry up and get picked, and then before you know it, you're on the main roster and you're still kind of green. But, you know, instead, they spend years wrestling. These are the guys that, like Daniel Bryan, they're like, yeah, I wrestled in a high school gym. I made $5 that night, but it was an excellent match, you know. So these are like the pure wrestling guys, you know. And I want to go back to a couple of things you said. First of all, that match with Johnny Wrestling, I watched that match. It was fantastic. In fact, I made a promo clip to let people know that you were coming on the show, and I used a piece of that match in the promo clip, which was actually almost, I think it was like the finish of the match, which was, man, it was insane. I don't know, man.
Beautiful sequence.
Yeah, I get Johnny Wrestling. I wanted his tag team partner to win. I felt like, you know, man, that guy is intense, man. But I get it. You know, he's Johnny Wrestling's Johnny Wrestling, so he's got to go over. I get that whole deal. But I want to talk about the New Japan crowds. Like, have you ever heard the wrestlers talk about how it feels to wrestle in front of these Japanese crowds?
I can't say that I really heard too many speak on that topic now.
Okay, so I've heard, like, because I listen to a lot of, like, the Stone Cold podcast and Chris Jericho's podcast, and I've read a lot of like their books and stuff, and so you're always hearing stories, you know, about the road and what happens backstage, and all kinds of stories about, you know, when they went to all these different countries, but specifically Japan, everybody's got the same story. So, like, for instance, when you're Stone Cold Steve Austin and you're wrestling a match, they don't, back in the day, the matches, the only thing that was really scripted was the outcome. The match itself was not scripted. It was being called in the ring, which is super awesome, right? They're just, like, going with the flow and everything. But the thing about it is, so the guy who was calling the match would be the ring general, because it's not, obviously, when you're dancing, you got to have a leader and a follower, you know? And so Stone Cold was a ring general. So typically when he was in the ring, he would call the match, you know, and it would be like, you know, as you can see during the matches, they whisper in each other's ears and stuff like that. But the way that he would call the match was based on the crowd's reaction. He could tell. That's ring psychology, okay? So if they're getting super hyped, but he knows he's still got, you know, let's say 12 minutes left in the match, then he knows, you know, okay, let's do like a snap nair, and you put me in a headlock, and let's bring the tempo back down. And then at a certain point, if the tempo gets too low, then he knows, okay, let's do a couple high spots and get the engine, you know, revved back up inside of their hearts, you know. And so when you wrestle in front of these crowds, you know, in New Japan Wrestling and all the other Japanese promotions, the wrestlers are like, what the fuck? Everybody's so quiet, and you know, they go out there and they have the best match that they could have, but the crowd being vocal is instant feedback for a wrestler. And so when you're in Japan and the crowds, you know, because the culture obviously is different and they're a lot more reserved, they get back to the dressing room and they're like, God, I must have sucked out there, because I didn't get a reaction of anybody. Nobody clapped. Nobody did anything. But, you know, and all the while, in the hearts of the Japanese fans, they have so much respect for the craft that's happening in the ring, because for them, it's like a legit sport. Like, when I say legit, I mean, when they wrestle in Japan, the next day when you read the newspaper, it lists every match, it lists how long the match took place, and it lists the outcome in the newspaper.
Wow.
Okay, so when they wrestle in Japan, it is like for sure, all the way legit for them. And they have so much respect, the fans, for the craft that they don't want to throw off the wrestlers' concentration by being loud, which I don't know if Americans, it's kind of funny how you can just travel a couple hours away and, or as they say, a world over, and the entire thing is just, the culture is so different, man. Because I would think, let's cheer for these guys, and they're thinking, no, let's not ruin their concentration. We have so much respect for them, All right, guys, you've just been listening to an interview with myself and Bian Green, my special guest for the day. We've talked about all kinds of topics, but this interview got so good, we had to break it down in the middle. And also, there's going to be a part 2 to this interview next week. So thank you so much for listening to part 1. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we're definitely going to put up the second part to the interview next Monday so you can hear the rest of it. I think it's an interesting one so far. Bian Green turned out to be one of my favorite interviews that I've done so far. So much knowledge of the wrestling business and such a pleasure to speak to. So tune in next week to the second part. And obviously, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my interview with Bian Green, all about the Cruiserweight Classic and what made him a wrestling fan in the first place. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday. Enjoy Monday Night Raw tonight. Time for me to get on down the road.